Fantastic. Well, welcome to Adopting a Coaching Mindset. And this is a session that we do a lot as part of our leadership development program, because to be honest, it's a paradigm shift. We often get into roles where we have a team of people that we are trying to get to move all in the same direction. And we immediately think of ourselves as a manager. And that can actually make people leadership much more difficult. And so as you think about the great coaches, I'm a huge sports fan. And I grew up with a father who was less about cheering for a specific team and more about like really being in awe of great coaches. Pat Nixon was one of the ones that I grew up just absolutely acknowledging and recognizing that the way she got the best out of every single player was very different. I also grew up in the Chicagoland area, so I grew up during the Bulls dynasty. And if you ever want to watch or dig into the mindset of a coach, Phil Jackson is one of the best. And some of his work around really thinking about what is your role as a coach changes our concepts around and paradigm around how we're supposed to show up as a people leader. And today we're going to give you the tools that we've put together based on my many years of experience, not only as an HR professional, so helping teach other leaders how to lead, but also my own personal experiences. For those that I have not had the opportunity to work with directly before, give you a little bit of background. I started People Solutions Center 10 years ago as a consulting firm. I now have a team of 7 full-time HR and senior talent advisor consultants on my team. We help support small to mid-sized companies across the country who are really trying to build great cultures and great businesses, but need the resources in the HR space to help them do that. I will be honest, I had a call this morning with one of my Phoenix clients that filled my heart. I met him probably 8 years ago, and he was a smaller business. He has probably doubled, if not tripled in size in terms of numbers of employees. And we were just having a nice coffee chat this morning, and he shared with me that one of his team members went out of their way last year to put together a nomination for his business for the top 10 business to work for in the Scottsdale area, and they made the final list, and it was all based on work that their employees did. And he said, Katie, you know what? I've done a lot of things as a business owner, but that to me was probably one of the most impactful pieces. And so we really work with teams to build those kinds of cultures. And it starts with you having the opportunity to really change your mindset as a leader, whether you're the owner or you're a senior leader in the organization, or you're a frontline supervisor. How you approach that looks very different when you start to get this coach mindset. And so what we're going to do today is help give you the context for what that means and understand sort of what are the tools in your tool belt that help you every day be more of a coach to your team and have to spend a lot less time in the manager hat. When I explain this paradigm shift to folks, I really take out the job title version of what we get labeled with at work, right? Some of us are supervisors, some of us are managers, some of us are senior managers, some of us are just owners, but we get caught in that job title and immediately go, oh, I manage people. But if you stop for a minute and think about how it would feel if somebody woke up this morning and said, good morning, I'm here to manage you, it doesn't leave a great taste in our mouth, right? We immediately have sort of negative connotations associated with being managed because that's about controlling me, right? It doesn't invest in me or it doesn't help me grow or be challenged in what I'm doing. Instead, we have to start thinking about leadership as a whole in terms of having 3 different hats that we wear in this leadership role. And the first hat is this hat of being the leader, right? Envisioning a future state. And depending on where I'm at in that ladder of leadership, how far out that future state is can vary. If I'm a frontline supervisor, envisioning future state is really just at least about thinking about what are we doing 3 days from now versus what are we doing today. As I get into senior leadership roles, it's about how much time do you spend looking 12 months, 18 months down the road to envision where you want your business to be. The second hat that we have that we often don't stop long enough to use is this coach hat, right? Coaching is about collaborating with our team members to develop them, to allow them to not just do the job in front of them today, but to understand what skills do they need so that they can do some other roles in the future or do the current role even better and be more empowered in the future. And then our third hat is our manage hat. And when we're in our manage hat, we are literally looking down at the train tracks right in front of us and trying to put those train tracks down while the train is coming at us. We've got to get things done. We've got to get them done fast, but we don't have time to really develop people. And so I often will teach clients, right, that we have to actually visualize ourselves wearing 3 different hats at different times and figuring out, do you have the right hat on for the right situation? And more importantly, are you spending the right amount of time in your leader and coach hat so you can spend less time being a manager? Because managing people isn't fun for you and people don't enjoy being managed. And so today we're going to kind of unpack what that mindset shift is, because it's not really about doing different things. It's about doing the things you're doing, but with a different approach. So to give some perspective about what we mean about these 3 hats. So the leader hat to me is really about looking up from the hood of the car. I often will tell a story. I have a very good friend who drives her car by looking at the hood, right? Like literally she's staring at the hood ornament and she's trying to keep that hood ornament in the middle of the lanes, right? The problem is, if you've ever driven with somebody who drives like this, often new drivers will drive this way. The problem with it is, in order to keep that very narrow focus in the middle of the lanes, you have to move the steering wheel in a very jerky manner. You can't see enough, so you end up jerking all over the road. And I tell folks all the time, 2 things happen when you ride with somebody like that. 1, you feel like you're either going to throw up or you're going to die. Neither one of them feels particularly fun. But when we're in manage mode, we are driving our business or driving our team from the hood of the car, just trying to make sure that things stay between the center lines on a daily basis. When we're in leader mode, we instead pick our heads up, and now all of a sudden you can see the full horizon. You can see what's out ahead of you. You can avoid obstacles without having to do wild swerves in the road, right? The perspective changes quite a bit. And so our role in thinking about these 3 hats is, even if I'm the frontline supervisor, I still have to, right? You don't want me thinking about what has to happen 12 months from now, but you don't want me just thinking about what needs to happen in the next hour, because otherwise my team's going to feel like we're driving from the hood of the car. And so our leader hat is those moments that we step back and we look up and we see where we need to be in the future and how do I keep things from being in crisis mode. When we're in senior leadership roles, this is taking days like stepping back at the 90-day mark and thinking about, where do we need to be by the end of the year? What does this need to look like 6 months in the future? What talent do I need on my team to take things off of my plate so I have more time to do this leader work? And so when we do that, we start to expand our ability to really show up as a leader. So that's what we mean by our leadership hat. What's really interesting is leadership is a process of social influence. It doesn't always come with a job title. In fact, most of you can probably think about situations where you have somebody on your team who has a lot of social influence, and so they are a leader in their own right because people will follow them. But also they tend to be people who can see further down the road and get people to envision where you're heading and then get them excited about going there with them. Leadership is also about setting strategic vision. So the higher you are in the career ladder, the more time you're spending in that, like, what does 6 months look like? What does 12 months look like? And what will we need to get there? And most importantly, it's about inspiring. When we talk about coach versus manager, managers lever incentives, right? Do this for 7 straight days and I will give you a gift card, or accomplish this goal and everybody gets a bonus. But when we're in leader mode and we're using our coach hat, we're leading people, we're inspiring them, we're finding their motivation. And so I get results through motivating, not through incentivizing. Our second hat is this coach hat. And coaching is a collaborative process between a coach and employee. And one of the big things that we need to realize if we're going to have a coach mindset is this shift that all of a sudden I have to earn the right to be somebody's coach, right? Somebody has to let me in as their coach, or else I'm just telling them answers and what to do. Once I earn their trust and now they see me as somebody investing in their growth, think about mentors, right? Now I've become their coach because we're working collaboratively. The idea is still to get to business goals. So this isn't about just like having a soft, fluffy relationship, but it's how we get to those business goals that feel very, very different. When we're in coach mode, we're actually advocating for the employee. Sometimes we're advocating for them with them, right? One of the hardest things that I run into sometimes with team members is their lack of confidence. They have the ability to do their job, but they don't have the confidence to have that hard conversation, or they're not sure if it's okay if they step out there right on that limb that they've never done before. But by being their advocate, I'm encouraging them to make that leap and making it a safe way for them to try something new. It's also, coaching is about a two-way conversation. This isn't about, I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to give you feedback, and I'm going to tell you what you're doing differently, and then I'm going to walk away. Instead, we're going to have a dialogue around what is it you want to learn? Where do you need to go next? What will help you get better at this piece? The cool part about coaching is it actually relates to behavioral change. So a lot of times a client will call me like, Katie, I have told this person 100 times to do it this way and they're not doing it. And I'm like, well, that's because you told them, right? You didn't coach them. You told them. You tried to manage them to get an outcome that you're looking for. That's the really critical part. But you have to be consistent. You can't show up one day as a coach and then 10 days of being a manager and then show up as a coach again. You have to keep this coach hat on a regular basis so people trust that you're going to lead with coach and only manage when we're in those situations where that's the hat we need to have on. Management, the third hat, right? Being a manager, we manage processes. And sometimes we manage people, but when we're in manager hat, we are controlling things. I always think about manager hat as looking at the hood of the car. This is all about how do I get stuff done, not how does somebody get better while we're doing it, or how do I get it done this time, but next time somebody else can take this off of my plate, right? We get really laser focused on the task right in front of us. And to be honest, this doesn't create the kind of cultures where people want to engage at a higher level or are willing to think about, we do it this way, but it's because we've always done it. There's actually a better way. And so they don't come to the table with recommendations and solutions. They simply keep doing it the way you said because that's what you told them to do. And they go home with their paycheck and they're happy. Management is focused on tasks. It's about directing and controlling. It's about my favorite, right? When somebody says, what do I do with this? We give them an answer. We don't give them the opportunity to even think about, do they actually know the answer themselves? And most importantly, we get really administrative in our approach to things. And so we don't help people raise to the next level, which unfortunately means that as a leader, I don't get to free up any of my time to do the more impactful leading and coaching type of work because I'm always just following that next emergency. I'm staying in crisis mode all of the time. So I want you to take a moment and just think about, for you today, what percentage of your time do you spend in manager hat, coach hat, and leader hat? Right? Where do you get stuck spending it today? And also think about, where would you ideally like that to be? So take a minute, and actually, if folks are willing to share, if you'll throw some thoughts in the chat, what percentage, if it had to add up to 100, right? What percentage of your time are you in leader mode, coach mode, and manage mode? I'll give an example for me. A year ago, I would have said I was probably only getting to spend about 10% of my time in leader mode because I was so focused on in the business. I prefer spending time in coach mode. So I was probably in that mode closer to 60%. And then that other 30%, I was really in manage mode. That was not, though, where I wanted to be. I actually wanted to shift. I, as owner, need to spend more time in leader mode. I would say this year, I've probably gotten that closer to about 25% of my time. My coach mode right now, I have a phenomenal team that they lean into coaching. Literally, my team will send me a note and say, hey, coach, this is what I want to talk about this week. We have actually added to our weekly focus sheet a question that says, what do you most need from your coach today? So that I can put the right hat on and show up. So my coach hat is probably, that's probably easily sort of 70% of where I'm at. And then I've got a really small percentage on, I'm not even sure today with the team I have not had to step into manage mode in a really long time. And I would love to keep it that way. So we've got folks that have kind of put things in, and right, like we're spending a lot of time in manage mode. And I'm guessing for most of you, that doesn't feel particularly fulfilling. A lot of times when leaders say to me, like, Katie, I just don't like the people side, it's because they're having to spend so much time in the manage hat that it doesn't feel fun anymore. So the idea behind all of this is, how do you start to do, none of us has more hours in the day. So it's not that we want to like start doing extra activities, but it's about doing the same things we've been doing it, but doing it with a different mindset. And I'm going to walk through for you what are the mindset shifts and examples of how we approach things when we're in manage mindset versus how we approach things when we're in coach mindset. And as you start to think about how you can position this and the outcomes you would get, you'll see like huge differences in the impact you can have on your team members. So I'm going to break these down into kind of buckets of 3. And I want you to think about in each of these shifts, what comes naturally to you and what is a little bit more difficult. But at the first piece is the shift. In manage mode, we tell people what to do. And in coach mode, we ask. Now, this does not mean we ask like we say please, because we should always do that anyway, but that's not what coaching really is about. It's really about even just how do we answer questions and how do we give instructions. So when I'm in manage mode, I tell you, here are the 5 steps, do them in this order. This is what I need you to do. When I'm in coach mode, instead, I have that same conversation with the employee about what we need to do, but instead I say, here's the outcome that I'm looking for. Walk me through, like, what do you think the next steps will be? What process do you think you should follow? How do you plan to approach it? So now I'm hearing the answers from the employee, and I have a much better sense of what do they already know? Where do they maybe need some guidance and redirection? But they now become the person responsible for really envisioning where they're going to head. Same thing in this one goes when somebody comes to you with a question. And this one is hard habit to break. When somebody comes to you with a question, do you simply tell them the answer? Or do you ask them a great question back? If somebody comes to me and says, here's the problem, what do I do? If I constantly feed them the answer, I only get so far, right? They only know the answer in that context versus somebody comes to me with a question and I say, what are you thinking? What are you feeling like is the right outcome here? What obstacles might you run into with that? How do you think you might come out of that obstacle? Why didn't you pick this answer instead? And now I understand how their brain is working, and it puts me in a better position to actually coach the person, because I don't have to have them think like me, but I need them to understand the decision tree so that they can make decisions on their own. This is probably the most critical skill for somebody who's trying to make this mindset shift from manage to coach. The second mindset shift is this idea of fix versus develop. When we are in fix mode, we get really focused on this person isn't good at this, let's fix them, right? Or we're fixing a process, but we come at everything from a place of let's take the thing that's broken and make it better. When we're in coach mode, we come at things more from a develop perspective, which often means leading from a strengths perspective. There are things that I am never going to be good at. No matter how hard I work, they're just not going to come very naturally. I can work for somebody who spends a lot of time trying to fix me, or I can work for somebody who has figured out, you know what? Katie may not ever get good at this, but if we develop this other skill enough, then maybe that won't matter. My father was actually phenomenal at this. I was horrible at math growing up. I hated math. My father was a math teacher, ironically. So I would come home every night, my dad and I would sit down at the kitchen table and we'd do my math homework together. And my dad always came at it from a perspective, he didn't need me to be a math genius. Quite honestly, some years he was probably just happy that I didn't fail altogether. So he never made me feel like we were fixing me. We were just developing different skills. Ironically, I got to calculus in senior year of high school, and we were like 6 weeks into school, and I haven't sat down with dad to do any homework. And he was like, should I be worried? Like, what's going to happen with your math? And I was like, Dad, calculus makes sense. And we were both a little perplexed and a little confused by how calculus made sense, but algebra 1 did not. But suddenly he figured out, like, now we know calculus to me was far more strategy and far less rules and policies. I'm the only person, I can't even explain it to a math teacher, but it worked. But now, like, I actually ended up being a coach and mentor to other students, a tutor to students in math in college, because somebody developed another part of my brain that compensated for the fact that, you know what, I can use a calculator. That's fine. I just need to be able to stay in strategy level work. And so he developed a skill to compensate for the fact that, right, I'm never going to just be naturally good at the math part of math. The third piece is the difference of focusing on process versus focusing on the employee. When we focus on process, we just keep burning out one checklist after another, and we're sure the checklist is going to solve the problem. Well, if we ask employees, like, you seem to be struggling in this area, tell me more. What are you struggling with? Where do you seem to get caught up? How are you thinking about this problem? It may be that process doesn't work for that person, right? We have to get to know people. We can't just keep hammering on the process. When you take these 3 mindset shifts, right, as a whole, all of a sudden you start creating this culture where people feel like you've invested in them, you care about them, and more importantly, they're excited to lean in because you are pouring back into them. If you'll take a minute while as you sort of process even those 3 things, think about which of those 3 mindset shifts will come most easily to you. Feel free to drop it in the chat so we can kind of see. What's interesting is some of you will find asking questions versus telling people answers comes really naturally. Others of you will be like, oh, that is the hardest thing in the world to do. So there's no good or bad. We just have to know what's the mindset we really have to focus on. Let's see where we got some chat. Yeah, the ask one is hard. One of the tools that I use sometimes when I know I really have to be in the right mindset, I will actually take a rubber band and put it on my right arm. And every time I go through my day and I tell somebody the answer, instead of asking them a question, I have to move the rubber band to the other wrist and move it back and forth and see how many times during the day, like, can I keep the rubber band on the correct on the same wrist all day long? It just helps you. The tangibility of that rubber band can really help you think differently about this. The next 3 mindset shifts kind of also go hand in hand because it's really about the lens with which you're looking at these conversations. The first is when we're in manage mode, we are 100% in reactive mode. There's no way to not be because, again, this is I'm laying on the train tracks while the train is coming at me. And so I can't ask people a lot of questions about the project I just gave assignments for because the project needed to be done 10 minutes ago. Right? If I always wait to the last minute, then I have no opportunity to spend slowing down long enough to have that coaching conversation. I just have to tell people what to do. When I'm proactive, now I have the opportunity. I just did this with one of my team members. It was the first time she was working on a project like this. She's done smaller versions of it, but now there was a bigger project. And we spent time on our coaching conversation that week. And I said, okay, 2 weeks from now, we have this next project coming up and it's a little bit more complex. gave her the outline of like, here's the outcomes we need for the client. And I said, walk me through, like, how are you thinking that differs from what you've done? What things, how are you planning on approaching it? And before the project even started, we were able to really outline, not me tell her, but her tell me, here's what I'm thinking. This is what I'm seeing. This is what could go wrong. And this is where I feel most confident and least confident. Now I know when to be involved as her coach along the way versus waiting till she's done and going, oh no, you did it wrong and it's due tomorrow. So the more time we can set aside to be proactive, this is why scheduling weekly or bi-weekly coaching conversations and keeping them on the books, we have to slow down to go fast, but doing this allows you to have the coaching conversations that keep the mistakes from happening beforehand. Similarly, when we're in manage mode, we are looking in the rearview mirror. For most of you, if you do performance evaluations, you are 100% in manage mode, right? We're looking in the rearview mirror at what's already happened. When we're in coach mode, we're looking out the windshield, thinking about what's coming up and what do you need to be successful 1 week, 3 weeks, 6 weeks from now, and how can we help give you some of those skills today? Now I have time to send somebody to a class. Now I have time to walk them through the project before it kicks off. Now I have time for them to shadow somebody on a similar project before they need to do it themselves. The third piece of this is what happens when we get really good at the first two. So when we are in manage mode, we assign tasks. And what I tell people all the time, right? When we are in manage mode and we are staring down, this project has to be done by this time, we have a task to get done. We immediately give it to the person who already knows how to do the job. What if instead, though, if I'm forward focused, I don't give it to the person who already knows it. I give it to the person that doesn't. And then I proactively help. I ask great questions so that they're ready to handle it on their own. Because there's never a time when we're assigning tasks that somebody gets a chance to learn. And so instead, we start to leverage resources. One of the individuals on my team, she's been with us now for 5 years. She started with us as an intern, and now she is a senior coordinator, moving on her way into generalist mode. And we're constantly looking at the projects on Kat and I's plate going, okay, Kat and I can do this work in our sleep. We've written more job descriptions than we know what to do with, but how can we bring Adriana in, not only because it frees us up, but more importantly, she has to learn those things. And so 2 years ago, well before it was her job, we had her start riding along with Kat on meetings so she could hear the conversations before them. We had her creating some templates for us internally as a team because yes, cobbler's kids often don't have shoes. And so we needed job descriptions for my company. And so Adriana treated me like the client and wrote our job descriptions for us, right? So we're leveraging resources to get things done so that people learn versus just assigning it so that it can get done in the moment. Take a minute here. Again, just like you all did it for the last one, I'd love to hear from folks of those 3 pieces, the being reactive versus proactive, rear view mirror versus forward focused, or assign tasks and leverage resources. Which will be the most challenging for you in this mindset shift? Feel free to throw that in the chat. It's a great thing to think about, like, where does this fall for you? And then the last 3 mindset shifts, and again, these all build on things, right? These all build on each other. They don't operate in a silo, but these last 3 things become really critical to kind of be the icing on the cake. They love some of the chat stuff, right? Being proactive is hard. It does mean you have to think about how that's going to happen. We'll talk about some examples of ways to make that happen, to make life easy. And we do get really involved in assigned tasks. Again, when we're in crisis mode, get it done tends to be our mindset. So the next 3 pieces fall under like that last piece that really comes together when you step into coach mode. When we're in manage mode, we direct activities, right? We're driving from the hood of a car. We're just telling people what to do. When we're in coach mode, you've heard me say it throughout this, right? I sit down and I outline What's the outcome I'm looking for? What's the strategy that has to happen? And you've got to give people that high level. Otherwise, we walk around and we say, move this thing, plant that thing, do this over here, handle this with your flooring. And all they learn is this series of tasks, but they don't see the bigger picture. Instead, if you can paint the bigger picture for your team and then they're working on a task, they're likely to come back and be like, you told me to put that thing over there, but I'm looking at it. You also said you wanted this outcome. And if I put this over here, it's not going to work well. Did I get it right? Is there another way to think about that? And now, again, I don't have to come back later and be like, well, my idea was like, I got the idea wrong and I gave the wrong direction, but they did what I told them to do. Now you have people who are able to follow those decision trees on their own. But we have to outline the bigger strategies. What's the outcome I want you to get? Not here's all the steps I want you to do to get there. The second piece, when we are in manage mode, we focus on what. We tell people what to do, right? Here's the checklist, here's the thing. But when we coach people, we focus on the why. And the why is so critical because if I don't understand why, then you're never going to get to what's my motivation to do it. You're always going to have to rely on giving me incentives to do the thing you want me to do versus channeling what my motivations are to accomplish the goal. If I don't know, I just was talking to a client the other day. We were talking about they're struggling with folks calling out sick when it's really hot. They work outdoors and it's really hot. It's easy for people to be like, oh, I don't feel well today. And they legit maybe don't feel great, but could they push themselves? And what they realized was they had never shared with the team. They have a really well-defined schedule that says these things have it's a seasonal thing. So, right, these things have to happen by this point in the season or else we're behind. And they're about 2.5 weeks behind where they would like to be. And I asked a question. I said, does the team know you're behind? So if I'm laying there in the morning and maybe I don't feel great, but I don't feel awful, right? If I go, but if I call out today, the team's going to be further behind and I'm letting the team down, it might not work for everybody, but some people would be like, you know what, let me just push it and see how I feel, right? And so it changes how my mindset as a team member, if I understand why it matters in the bigger picture. Again, though, changing from just telling people what you need and explaining why you need it or why you even need it a specific way can really make a huge difference. And the last mindset shift to go from being manager to being coach is when we're in manage mindset, we are just trying to control the people. I always say this feels like you're trying to play whack-a-mole at Dave and Buster's, right? You're just trying to hit all the moles as fast as you can and keep them down. And it never feels like you're very successful. And suddenly one day you're just like, why can't everybody just do it the way I need them to? Most of us have probably felt that frustration before. It's a sheer sign that you are in manage mode. And if you just shifted to coach mindset, now you start empowering people because they understand the strategy. They know where you're trying to go. They understand the why. And you can send them out, not throw them into the deep end of the pool and hope they figure it out. You already know that they understand the decision tree. They have the skills you need. And now you can trust them to do the thing that you need to do or to come back to you when they're like, oh, I got this far, but now I'm stuck. Right? And so all of these things work hand in hand, but it is a huge movement to go from manage mindset to coach mindset. Take off the manager hat, put on the coach hat. Now, when we get really good at this, we actually start every day in the coach hat, and we only take it off to put on the manage hat when, right, crisis happens. And hopefully that's a really small percentage of the time. Or we've coached and coached and coached, and somebody's just not in the right seat, and we need to move them out of that seat. Then yes, we sometimes need to put that manage hat on. But if we can start with coach hat as our go-to, then we don't have to think all day about switching it back and forth. It's just always on our heads, and we're approaching everything from that perspective. As we think about what that means, there's mindset and then there's skill set. You got to change your mind before you can worry about the skills. But once you've made that shift from the mindset, now you got to figure out, okay, so how do I do this? How do I get the other person to engage appropriately? Because you can manage people, right? That's a do to someone else thing, but I have to earn the right to be your coach. And so we have to step in with all of the right tools. These are the skill sets that make great coaches. The first one that is most critical is you have to build trust. And this one is another paradigm shift for a lot of people, because when we're in manage mode, we tend to approach this in terms of, hey, I have this new hire and I'm going to wait to see how they do. And then if I trust them, I'll give them a little bit more, or I'll pour into them and I'll invest in them. But we keep waiting for us to trust them. Coaches don't have that luxury. Coaches lead the way because, again, remember, I have to collaborate and I have to earn the right to be your coach. Well, if I don't trust you, you're not going to trust me back. So I'm never going to earn that right. Instead, I have to lean in. I have to be the one willing to take the risk. And I have to be the person that says, I trust you. Let me pour into you. Allow me the luxury of being your coach. And now I can start earning that person's trust, and so they can know that I'm going to put them out there. I'm going to teach them. I'm going to invest in them, but I'm also going to let them just make decisions on their own and give them a safety net with which to do it. So build trust is the number one most important thing you can do if you're going to be a coach. You cannot coach somebody and not start to trust other people. It's probably one of the biggest obstacles I see leaders struggle with as they start to make this shift, if you are somebody who's naturally slower to trust people. The second piece, kind of going around this circle, I'm actually going to jump to the top of this because it's the next skill that is often hard for people, and it's listen to learn. Right? We listen for a lot of things. We listen to respond. We listen to debate. We listen to tell people why they're wrong. Sometimes we listen to tell you my own version of the story, right? But we actually have to listen to learn, and we're trying to learn how someone else's brain works, right? We're trying to learn how they went A plus B equals C, because it's different than the way our brain took in the information. And if we don't understand how their brains work, we'll never get there. Alongside of that is this concept of asking great questions. This is that we have to stop telling people and we have to start asking people great questions to help them unpack and learn and show us that they already know, so that we don't just keep hammering. We start to empower them to come up with answers on their own. A couple of the others are important, but tend to come a little bit more easily to folks. One is be present. You cannot be in coach mode and have your brain go in 50 different directions. So you've got to be present with what's happening, and find ways to help yourself do that. Whether that be get yourself in the right mindset in the morning and do some meditation so that you're a little bit more focused. Block your days so that you are more effective in coach mode, right? If you're trying to always be on the fly and give people instructions as you're running through your day, you won't ever be present enough to coach. And so things like setting up regularly scheduled one-on-ones, having that time saved on the calendar so that you are investing time proactively, not in let's go through your to-do list, but what on your to-do list are you struggling with? What's the thing that you most would like to get done this week, but you keep finding you get it distracted from, right? Like, now we've changed the conversation. And then the last, one of the other pieces of it is watching your language and noticing whether or not, do you say we do, or do you talk about I do? Individuals that say we more than I, or we more than me, are going to be in coach mode, because, right, it's not about getting results myself. It's about getting results through others, which brings out the we. And people need to know that you're in it with them, but that doesn't mean they want you to literally like be in everything with them, but they want you to be their safety net and also their teacher, so that they can step into new space and not be scared that a mistake will, cause yelling, screaming, conflict kind of things that you don't want. So I want you to take a minute here to self-reflect a little bit and think about this trust piece. So we talked about all of the different skills, but trust is at the crux of whether or not you ultimately will be successful, even if you make a mindset shift. And it's one of the areas that I often see leaders struggle because they're like, well, I just don't trust people. One of my leaders that has been probably most impressive in terms of making this shift said to me the other day, he's been in a spot where he's had a lot of organizational change. He's not the head of the organization, but he's kind of a frontline leader. And he does not naturally trust people in general. He's very cynical of people, a little on the sarcastic side, very cynical. And he's gone through some leadership changes that very much could have caused him to shut down and to not be successful. And when I asked him, I said, you're showing up very differently here than I would have expected you to do. And he actually just recently got promoted to a more senior role. And I said, I'm curious, like, it would have been easy for you to not trust, and you probably wouldn't be where you are today. And he said, Katie, you're absolutely right. He said, trust does not come naturally. I have to choose it. But it finally dawned on me that choosing to trust was more likely to get me a good outcome than if I didn't choose to trust. It was this wasn't ever going to work. So I had to choose to trust and see where it led me. It's a really hard shift for a lot of people. But when you think about that in terms of your direct reports, right? When you don't trust people, you don't leverage resources. You don't give them something that maybe you're worried because you're trying to control it, and you don't invest in them as their coach. You hold it all on to yourself. Well, when we do that, people end up frustrated. People feel the lack of trust, and it sucks. Like, nobody wants to feel like they're not trusted. And so we as leaders have to choose to trust. This is something that is really hard for folks, and you've got to figure out how to make that happen for you. Some of you, this will come really easily. Your speed of trust. I'm a 1 on a speed of trust. I trust everybody. I trust you multiple times, even if you do something that should have broken my trust. It's unlikely that you will. And my husband says I'm most likely person to get stolen and then make friends with the people who stole me. So this is really easy for me. I actually have to be a little bit more careful on the other side, but you have to stop and think about, for you, where are you on that speed of trust, and where is it possibly keeping you from being a great coach to your team members? The last pieces I want you to think about today is the skill of listening to learn. And when you think about listening to learn, pay attention to your conversations over the next couple of days. And what is it you actually listen to do? Sometimes people listen to respond. Some people listen to debate, right? Particularly if they know they're in disagreement. They don't listen to learn the other person's perspective. They listen to debate and get their side out on the table. Sometimes we listen to critique somebody else's perspective. Sometimes we listen to correct. And actually, there's a whole group of people who actually listen to connect with one another. And if you're in this bucket, this is what it looks like. I'm telling a story. And while I'm telling my story, you're thinking about all the stories that you have that are very similar, that would show that we have a similar background, a similar perspective. And I can't wait to tell you my story. And I'm so ready to connect with you through my story that I stop actually listening to the details of your own. And so I miss the key points along the way. Listening to learn changes, most importantly, how we ask great questions. Because if I'm trying to learn how your brain works or what you've already accomplished in this, then I can start to ask great questions to help you up this pyramid of a decision tree. Right? And this pyramid is one of the ones, like, people that go through our leadership development workshop series take this and are like, that is printed out next to my computer every day, because it's about thinking about, what does the person, like, how do you lead with great questions to help somebody else process the information? So even in terms of, I was just teaching this session over the weekend, right? And we were doing a session on critical conversations, and we had a scenario where they had to give feedback to the employee. Well, the first time we did the exercise, we just said, like, here's the feedback you need to have the conversation. And we let people just try it. And everybody started the conversation with, I'm here to talk to you about the fact that you and Sam got in an argument yesterday, and this is what happened, and here's what I need you to do differently, right? They immediately went to Manage Hat. They told the people what they did wrong and what they wanted to change. Then we came back and we came at it from a questions perspective, right? And I told them, you got to have the same conversation, but you can only ask questions. You're not allowed to tell them anything. And now you start with, so walk me through what happened with Sam yesterday. Was there something that occurred before that impacted the way that interaction went? What do you feel went really well? What challenges did you run into that conversation with Sam? In hindsight, how do you think Sam maybe felt about that, right? Now the employee, like as I did a role play in front of the team with another person, and the other person finally, like, she knew exactly what I was trying to accomplish and she was trying to derail me. And when we got done, she finally just went, I wasn't very nice to Sam. I was like, great. How are we going to do that differently in the future, right? So by asking great questions, I sort of worked her up this pyramid from help me understand what happened to what options did you consider? What data do you already have? What other data might you need, right? What other things could be impacting the way Sam is reacting? All the way to, great, so you think another conversation with Sam is helpful. How do you think you might approach that? What do you think you need to do in preparation for that? What support do you need from me? And now that same conversation about this bad interaction with Sam yesterday turns into, I heard you, I listened to, maybe there was information about that came out that I'm like, ooh, I didn't know that. That changes my perspective. But the minute I start with, I want to talk about the conversation with Sam and you didn't do it right, that person's defenses go up and they don't think about whether or not what you say is right or not. They're already in defend mode versus walk me through what happened with Sam opens up a whole new approach to the conversation. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about leveraging this coach mindset and approaching the exact same scenarios and getting even better outcomes because we're doing it more with a forward focused approach. We're asking great questions and we're really listening to hear what people are thinking, because it turns out maybe Sam was a real jerk. Maybe there was a real reason that there needed to be the interaction that there was, and it would change our course of action along the way. When we do all of these things, you get to spend a whole lot more time in your coach hat. And I will tell you, I am hard pressed to find somebody who says, Katie, I'd really just rather manage, because coaching fills your soul. Coaching helps you feel like you've invested in people. And more importantly, coaching gets you way better results and at a whole lot less time than you will ever spend being in managed mode. So ask yourself, are you ready to start to make those changes and really shift your mindset and the way you go about them? A couple of great resources, and then I am going to give folks time for questions. As I said at the beginning, I will actually take us off the recording in case you have follow-up questions. A couple of great books that can be really helpful in this space. First of all, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. If you have not read it, by Patrick Lencioni, it is a great book, and particularly for folks that struggle with this trust piece of things. Lencioni's concept of trust and healthy conflict are key to being a great coach. So that one's a great book. Crucial Conversations is another one that can really help folks as you move into this coach mindset. And Radical Candor by Kim Scott is another one that I often suggest to people who are in really trying to develop this coach muscle. Also, if you're listening to this and going like, wow, that was really helpful and I need more of it, I need to learn how to build this muscle that is coaching. We do offer a leadership training program throughout the year. We offer different sessions. It's a workshop series that is very highly interactive. So not webinar based, like just listen to me talk, but highly interactive exercises that actually help you build these coaching muscles and figure out how to approach these conversations, how to even just set up your day to be far more successful. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me after today's session if that is something that would be helpful to you as you think about moving forward. In the meantime, we always love to say thank you to folks that really make a huge, take time to invest in their own development along the way. People Solutions Center, we do a lot in the leadership development work. We also support clients in their recruiting. So we're not headhunters, but if you are a small to mid-sized business, you don't have the time and resources often to make that hire and go find the right talent and be the expert at recruiting. And so our great recruiting team, Sarah and Nilsa, do a phenomenal job of being your recruiting expert. The third piece we do is we actually serve as HR strategist and HR director for your company, and just help you see, like, how do you build the culture that you want? How do you go from my client who literally, when I started working with him, was ready to pull the hair out of his head, to being on the top places to work for a small business list, and have a place where your team members are really helping nominate you that. Our HR strategy session is a kickoff to that. I offer it free to anybody that has been to one of our webinars. All you have to do is email us at hr@peoplesolutioncenter.com. I will get that scheduled. We meet, we talk about your challenges today, how you're set up today, where you're struggling, and I come back and give you just some really great recommendations, easy things you can implement that could make a big difference for your business. So it's another takeaway and a thank you for taking time out of your day today. I'll go ahead and leave that there for a moment. If folks do have questions, I'm going to turn off the recording. Say that.